All right, overnight airstrikes along the Israeli-Gaza border have injured 4 Palestinians. The strikes by Israeli warplanes was in response to what they claim were rocket attacks. So joining us now to discuss, we have Israeli human rights activist Miko Peled. He's also the author of the book, The General's Son, Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. Miko, good to see you. How much of this ceasefire has to do with this upcoming elections?
Well, I wouldn't call it a ceasefire. Israel is bombing Gaza and has been bombing and killing people in Gaza endlessly, constantly, all the time. And particularly, we've seen this over the last year with a return march protests every Friday. And it's interesting because now we had this tragedy in New Zealand at a mosque, and people are surprised that some lunatic picks up a gun and does something like this. We've got prime ministers and generals and people who get all the kind of, treated as dignitaries, murdering Palestinians without any consequences all the time. So it's a terrible, terrible time. And the reality in Gaza is that people want to be free. They want to go back to their homes. And Israel not only keeps them locked up in this what can only be described as a massive concentration camp, but also bombs them when they dare to stand up and speak.
Now, Danny Danon went on TV saying that these were missiles. Were they actually missiles, though?
Well, regardless if they're missiles or rockets, they're not missiles, they're rockets. But regardless, I mean, if he lived in Gaza, he would probably be shooting missiles too. I mean, people want to be free. People have a right to resist. What the people or the Palestinian people do in terms of resistance is sanctioned by international law. Resistance to an occupation, to oppression, to particularly this type of severe oppression is sanctioned by international law. They're not doing anything that they shouldn't be doing, and I think it's quite surprising that they do so little of it. But we have to remember, people in Gaza have no access to clean water. 2 million people living without water, electricity, basic most medical needs, healthcare needs, and 5 minutes away from the Gaza Strip in Israeli settlements, Israelis live with everything they could possibly want. So there's a reality there that certainly justifies, or if not justifies, at least explains why they're resisting.
So would you say, though, that Hamas did lob something, a projectile, in Israel's direction, but if that's the case, doesn't Israel have a right to respond? No,
Israel is not the one responding. Israel is the one that created the reality in which Palestinians have to resist. Israel is maintaining a vicious oppression, a vicious campaign of ethnic cleansing, and what can only be described as crimes against humanity, against the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are responding with various types of protests, one of which are these rockets that are coming out of Gaza. You don't have the right to respond when you're the one imposing the war, or when you're the one imposing the oppression, when you're the one that's imposing the killing on a nation that's never had an army. Palestinians have never had a military force. Right. There's never been a tank in Gaza or a warplane ever.
So the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu is running for re-election amid all of this drama between he and his wife, they're being indicted and what have you for corruption, do you think this sort of strong response to last night is partially to make him look like a strong man ahead of the elections?
Yes, killing Palestinians is good for business. It's good for elections. It's good for Israeli politics. I mean, if you look at the map of the Israeli politicians, the Israelis that are running for office, they're all competing with each other. Who killed more Palestinians? Who wants to displace more Palestinians? Who wants to take away more and more rights from Palestinians? That's the name of the game. That's what they're competing for.
It's a popular platform.
It's a very popular platform, and he knows that that's his key to winning, and that makes people forget the corruption charges and the indictment and everything else.
And he has recently, Benjamin Netanyahu, that is, has recently hitched his wagon to an extremist right-wing group or figures in the Jewish Power Party. The early iteration of this group was considered a terror group both by Israel and the United States. Why is he linking himself to them?
Well, it's a race to the right. Whoever can show that he's the farthest right is going to win this race. So he linked himself up with the farthest right that exists in the Israeli political map. Now, ideologically, they're not any different from him. So the only difference is that they're thugs, whereas he's a kind of a politician.
He's
a statesman thug, exactly. So ideologically, he has no problem with them. Politically, it's a right move for him. It was the right move for him, And so they're just to have don't have as good manners as he does. They're not as slick. That's the only difference.
And lastly, Miko, what do you make of the State Department, the U.S. State Department, dropping the use of the term occupation when they're referring to the Gaza Strip? They're now opting to call it Israeli-controlled region. Well,
I think it goes both ways. I mean, on the one hand, we know that the American foreign policy, when it comes to the Middle East, is being written by Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's being executed by Kushner. And so that's the reality. Now, at the same time, the West Bank, or what used to be called the occupied Palestinian territories, are no different than any other parts of Palestine, which are also occupied. In other words, it brings forward this reality that the entire country upon which Israel sits is occupied Palestine. And in a way, it kind of forces the conversation. Is it going to remain an apartheid regime over all of Palestine? Or can we now support the Palestinians for their desire and their claim to free all of Palestine and return the refugees?
Right. So if you no longer acknowledge it as occupation, then it becomes accepted in the narrative. So
on the one hand, it becomes accepted as narrative as all of Israel, but the reality is that it is all Israel. In terms of in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of transportation, and every other term that you look at, the entire country is Israel. Israel does not recognize any occupation, any parts of the country more occupied than others. Yeah. So in a way, it legitimizes it, but also reminds us that it's all occupied and it all needs to be free.
All right, so no surprise for you there. All right, Miko Peled, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thanks.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.